Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. As you know, most of my videos I talk about the different aspects of raising an autistic child or a child who is suspected to have autism. But neurodiversity, which is the understanding and appreciation of all different types of brains, includes all different diagnoses and all sorts of strength and difficulty profiles in people. And many neurodivergent individuals struggle with verbal speech for a number of different reasons. You know, it's not just those who are autistic. So, fueled by our fairly recent discovery that our son actually struggles with the production of sounds, not just communication in general, I decided to enlist the help of some others, some experts, to discuss all the reasons a child might not be able to talk or be able to talk as well as their peers, with a special focus on speech disorders. Now, before I hand over the reins to two highly experienced speech and language professionals from the UK and the US, if you are worried about what a speech sound disorder might mean for your child's future, please stick around until the end of the video because I have a very important message from a wonderful young man called Mikey who is living with verbal dyspraxia, which is often called Apraxia of speech in the US. And Mikey's speech wasn't really understood until he was a much older child. Finally, if you have a child with autism who has been diagnosed with a speech disorder as well, or if autism is currently their only diagnosis but you suspect that something else might be going on with their speech, keep an eye out for the other two videos in this three-part series which cover the co-diagnosis of autism and a speech disorder like apraxia, verbal dyspraxia. Right, over to Sophie.
Hello, my name is Sophie and I am a paediatric speech and language therapist. I've been working for over 17 years and specialise in working with children under 5. A big part of my job is around differential diagnosis, working out what's going on for a child and what the most appropriate therapy will be for them. Speech is highly complex. It's not a distinct skill. It doesn't develop on its own. It very much develops alongside our other communication skills. When you're speaking, using your speech, you're usually directing it to a person. So that's a social communication skill. Not everyone has good social communication skills. We also need to have content for our speech. So a system to convey our ideas and our thoughts, and these are our language skills. When a child isn't talking, we may not know is that because of a language need or because of an underlying speech sound need. One thing that's really important to look out for is a mismatch in skills. If you're seeing your child becoming increasingly communicative but the speech isn't catching up, you may well question whether there's a speech sound difficulty going on. There are so many different reasons that a child could be having speech sound difficulties, and there are different ways to classify speech sound disorders. But the main distinction is whether errors are due to an articulation issue or a phonological issue. So an articulation issue is motor-based, and I like to think of it as difficulties in the physical act of producing sounds, words and sentences. Phonological errors are a bit more tricky to explain, and that's because it's related to the way that the brain is organising patterns of sounds. And so any errors that are made have an impact on the meaning of words. So you can see that a phonological error is very much related to language. It's really, really important that we are able to differentially diagnose what's going on for a child, because the therapy for an articulation disorder is different to a therapy for a phonological disorder. In reality, that's really difficult to do sometimes. Children don't fit into neat diagnostic boxes, and in fact there's an overlap, and children often present with both articulation and phonological difficulties at the same time. When we we know the cause of a speech sound disorder, we call that an organic speech sound disorder. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. So if we know that a child has a cleft palate, we'll know that there are structural differences. If a child has cerebral palsy, we'll know that they're more likely to have dysarthria, which is as a result of the muscle weakness. There are lots of times that we just don't know why children have difficulties. There's no obvious reason, and we call those functional speech sound disorders. Research is getting better, and there are certainly risk factors that can help us to recognise that a child is more likely to have difficulties. Big one is relating to genetics. If there's a family history, it may be more likely that a child will have a speech sound disorder. Speech sound difficulties can present in so many different ways, and there's a huge spectrum of need. You might notice only gross approximations to the words. Maybe they only have a handful of consonants and vowel sounds that they can make. A more verbal child, there might be lots and lots of language, in which case you can really begin to notice error patterns. What sounds can they use? What can't they use? Are they missing sounds out, adding sounds? Are they distorting sounds? On the other side of the scale, you might only notice differences in the overall sound of a child's speech. So children might have difficulties with intonation or rhythm or stress. It really takes a good assessment and getting to know a child really well to work out what's going on for them.
Thank you so much, Sophie. I will link Sophie's social media pages below if you want to give her a follow or if you want to contact her yourself. Now I want to talk a bit about apraxia, or verbal dyspraxia as is known in the UK, which is an example of a speech sound disorder. So I am not a speech professional. However, I'm going to explain it in the way that it has been explained to me. So when we speak, messages go from your brain to your mouth to tell the muscles how and when to move to make sounds. Now, in a child with apraxia of speech or verbal dyspraxia, the messages do not get through correctly, and this results in very limited or unclear speech. The speech and language pathologist I'm about to introduce you to is an absolute fountain of knowledge. Instead of having her answer endless questions that may be relevant to some and not others, I'm just going to let her introduce herself and explain why apraxia awareness is so important to her. And also I'm going to include links to her social media pages, website and book, which is full of information. I, in particular, love Laura's Instagram page because of all the interviews she does with experts in this field. I have learned a lot about speech disorders from Laura's Instagram, so thank you for that, Laura. I will let her introduce herself.
Hello everyone, my name is Laura Baskell-Smith, and I am on here to talk about apraxia awareness and why I'm so passionate about raising awareness for it. It really started with the diagnosis of my firstborn daughter. I had been a practicing speech-language pathologist before she was born, but at 2 years 11 months I found out that she had childhood apraxia speech, among other developmental delays. The reason awareness is so important is because so many people have never heard of apraxia and they don't know what it is, and there's nothing more disheartening for a parent to not only get a diagnosis for your child, but then get a diagnosis that no one has ever heard of. Because if you've never heard of the diagnosis, how can you have appropriate treatment for it? Every child is unique, and their makeup with the disability is unique, and we can't make assumptions that a child with apraxia will always struggle with apraxia and can't overcome it, because that's not true either. Many times that is true, but it's not always true. And so it's very individual, and it's very important to see each child as an individual. And it's also very important not to put them in a box on what they're capable of. Children are children, their brains are so neuroplastic, and even as adults we see that the brain is capable of changing and growing and learning, and we don't know with therapy what the prognosis is for any child, regardless of how severe they might look.
Thank you so much, Laura. I will include all her links again in the description. And finally, I want to introduce you to Mikey. Now, Mikey was diagnosed with verbal dyspraxia at a very young age, and his journey to finding his voice was a long one and a difficult one. And he's now super passionate about raising awareness for the condition. He recorded a brief message for us, and also on his Instagram page, by the way, Mikey posts some really insightful, beautifully written accounts of what it was like growing up with verbal dyspraxia, as well as some lots of helpful information for parents, so I would encourage you to give him a follow on there.
My name is Mikey, I'm 19 years old and I live in the UK. I was diagnosed with verbal dyspraxia at the age of 2.5 years old. When I was at a very young age, I used to point and grunt, and when I attempted to speak, I would only speak in vowel sounds. When I was 8 years old, I started to be understood by people. The only feeling I can remember is the loneliness of not having anyone with verbal dyspraxia around me. The biggest challenge I have is communicating with people who I don't know. This makes everyday interactions really hard. The advice I would give to parents with children who have speech difficulties is to give them time to talk, encourage them to talk to other people, don't finish their sentences off, and don't give up on them, as with your support they will find their voice.
Thank you for watching, and like I said, if your child has a diagnosis of autism or you think they may receive one in the future, then I look forward to seeing you in part 2 of this video. I think it will be of great interest to you. If this video was helpful, please consider giving it a thumbs up, and if you want to follow our journey with our own son, please do subscribe. All links are in the description below. See you soon.